One of the more nonsensical storylines throughout the 2025 pre-draft process so far has been this storyline that people have come up with where in order to avoid talking about Shedeur Sanders as a possibility of the Browns to draft him and taking that prospect seriously, people have come up with the response of, well, Deion ain't never going to let Shedeur play here, right, as a reason to avoid an actual evaluation of him. If you want an actual evaluation of Shedeur Sanders, what I think he does well, what he doesn't do well, I have a long video on this channel where I go through it. I have film on there for you guys to watch to see the points that I'm talking about the pros and cons of Shedeur Sanders. Trust and believe, if you're subscribed to this channel, a discussion of Shedeur as a football player has not gone under-delivered. But to some people, that conversation has been under-delivered because people have assumed that Shedeur Sanders would refuse to play in Cleveland if the Cleveland Browns were to draft him. Now, there were multiple issues with that theory, but before we get too deep into it, I'm going to talk about why that whole thing got debunked. This video right here.
Who you play with?
I don't even play Madden. I can play Madden.
You know who I play with.
Yeah, I can play with anybody though. He can only play with one team.
What team?
Brown.
Okay.
That's the only team.
Okay.
I like how they
getting ready.
I like how they move around, bro.
That's the only team he can play with.
That boy getting ready.
Anybody else, he's trash.
I like how they move around on there. I like the setup. I'm about to get on the podcast. I'm just finishing my.
Now, again, I would like to point out, just like I did when Shedeur Sanders was rumored by some, like these aggregate accounts, to not be interested in the Cleveland Browns and how Deion was going to pull every stop to stop the Browns from drafting Shedeur Sanders, right? Like how they weren't on the list of team. I would like to remind folks that Shedeur Sanders is not a free agent. And Shedeur's opinion on what team should select him matters very little, right? In the grand scheme of things, he is not the one making the decision. The NFL GMs, the front offices, are the ones who will ultimately make the decision on whether Shedeur Sanders plays football for their organization or not. That's the most important thing to remember. But I would like to talk about this clip. One, to talk about how we keep falling for hype cycles in the pre-draft process, and this is clearly another example of it. To what the Sanders family is really good at, and what they deserve credit for, and what this is clearly a part of a larger machine of. And three, to kind of just tell y'all, I told you that there was no way that they were going to sit out a whole season because the Browns would draft them. Like, that idea was ridiculous. One, the idea that the Brown situation was so terrible that all of a sudden Shedeur would refuse to play here in Cleveland, when the other options are the New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, or the Las Vegas Raiders. I always thought that premise was ridiculous, right? On top of the premise that Deion Sanders had so much leverage, so much pull in NFL circles that he could actually force a team to not take somebody if they believed that somebody to be a franchise quarterback simply because he's their father and he don't want you taking him. That was always a ridiculous premise that was not based in reality. I did a video where Ocho Cinco and Shannon Sharp debunked that whole claim that he would be opposed to playing in Cleveland. They said straight up, it's not true. I don't know why people are saying this. They're lying. They said that in the video. Comment section of that video, even though there was objective proof of them saying that, is people buying into the lie that like, oh, Shedeur would never want to play here. And again, I would like to remind folks, Shedeur's not a free agent. It does not matter where he wants to play. He is a member of this draft class, and unless he's willing to sit out a whole year, he's going to go where he's drafted. He's going to play where he's drafted. He understands that. He knows that. Now let's talk about the larger game that's being played here. Because when people talk about the Sanders family, everybody brings their own emotions into it, and they bring their own fears and insecurity about what the Sanders family does mean and does not mean into conversations about anything involving the Sanders family. What Deion has done really good, and you have to give Deion great credit for, is Deion knows how to stir up interest in whatever it is that Deion is doing. Deion got a 30 for 30. He going to find a way to stir up some interest in that. And everybody going to watch the Deion 30 for 30. Deion wants to coach at Jackson State. Deion going to stir up that interest, and it's going to be a bunch of people on ESPN Plus who ain't never watched a lick of FCS football, who did not know what a HBCU was before finding out that Deion Sanders was there, and they're going to watch it. Not saying that HBCU football did not have an interest before Deion got there. That is obviously not true. HBCU games draw the best out of all schools in the FCS on a consistent basis. And they are some of the best drawing FCS football brands before Deion. Not saying Deion is responsible for the popularity of HBCU football. Obviously, there's a greater culture that's pushed that. But Deion got a lot of folks who would not watch Jackson State to watch Jackson State. Deion got a lot of folks who usually did not watch the Celebration Bowl to watch the Celebration Bowl and have takes about the Celebration Bowl, because Deion is really good about making you interested, right? The last 2 years, it's been a lot of folks talking about Colorado football. My whole life, I think I've had 2 conversations about Colorado football before Deion got there. Deion knows how to draw up interest on him, the things he's related to, and the things he's associated with. What are the most talked about things in college football? Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter. They play on Colorado. They're on Deion's team. So what the Sanders family does really well is they know how to market themselves. They know how to draw up interest. Now, here's something that I think I would love to point out. All of this stuff about Shedeur, hinting and making plays at the Cleveland Browns, right? All of this stuff was not happening before Miles requested a trade. Miles requests a trade. All of a sudden, Shedeur's telling us his first visits in Cleveland. All of a sudden, Shedeur's telling us he's playing with the Browns. All of a sudden, Shedeur is angling really hard about making you think he might be a Cleveland Brown. Now, why is this happening? Is it that Miles requested a trade and the Browns' response to that was to draft Shedeur Sanders? I think the Sanders family certainly wants you to think that. I think that is the intention of the timing of all of this stuff with Cleveland, is to get you to think that, because the Sanders family wants you to feel like Shedeur Sanders is a lock to go as high as possible. Maybe they're getting the vibe that it's not going to happen with Tennessee, because you notice they've made none of these overtures towards Tennessee, or maybe they're saving their overtures for Tennessee till closer to the draft. What I am saying here is that anything that comes from the Sanders family YouTube channel, I think it's Deion Sanders' son who runs that YouTube channel, understand that it is propaganda that's coming with a purpose, right? It is strictly from Deion Sanders' camp, right? Like, that is literally the Shedeur Sanders camp posting those videos, putting those things out there. They're putting those things out there for a reason, because they want you to think these things, right? They want you to think these things because it raises the value brand-wise of Shedeur Sanders for you to associate him with the 2nd overall pick, or the 3rd overall pick, or the 1st overall pick. They want you to make it feel like these teams are bidding for Shedeur Sanders, that there's this frenzy for Shedeur Sanders, despite the fact that it's likely not what's going on. Basically, don't get lost in the sauce, man. You're going to see a lot of hype come out about Shedeur, about Cam Ward, because both these guys, you're going to see a lot of hype about Shedeur Sanders. I mean, he basically has a reality TV show following him and posting updates every week in real time. There's going to always be something to talk about there. They want people to watch that YouTube channel. They want people to subscribe to that YouTube channel. How are they going to do that? By every week making you think like, oh, you're getting this nugget about where Shedeur is going to go. Like, you're getting this inside track. The reality is they're not in control. This is not free agency. Shedeur is going to go where he's drafted. And if the Browns want to draft him at 2, he'll play for the Browns. If the Browns don't want to draft him at 2, then he's not going to play for the Browns. As far as like the Browns bringing him out for visits and paying close attention to him and making overtures towards him and making him feel like they're interested in engaging him, of course they're doing that. They should be doing these things. The Browns should learn everything possible about every quarterback that they think is a first-round prospect in this year's draft, because if they don't want to take a quarterback at 2, they got to be extra sure that none of these quarterbacks are guys that they're going to regret not taking in the future. So I want them to do every bit of due diligence. Of course you're going to have Shedeur Sanders on a visit. I demand that they have Cam Ward on a visit too, right? Like, they got to do all of these things. They must do their due diligence if they're going to pass on a quarterback at 2, especially if they're going to pass on a quarterback at 2. But seeing like these clips, reacting to them as if they're concrete evidence of what the Browns are going to do or not going to do. Look, you could do it if you want because it's ultimately harmless at the end of the day. But I'm telling you right now, you're going to exhaust yourself. The Browns hold things very tight to their chest. It is very likely that nobody knows what the Browns are actually going to do. Everybody is either projecting based on their own thoughts or guessing. The Browns are one of the most secretive organizations in football. They're not going to expose their hand on the number 2 overall pick before they make their selection. So don't take this as like fact or anything else, right? Just kind of just enjoy the process for what it is. But yeah, I saw this clip. I was told about the reaction to it, and I find it interesting. And look, shout out to the Sanders family because they got a lot of people in Cleveland interested about drafting Shedeur Sanders, right? They're going to do the same thing with people in New York, right? Like, they know how to get people excited about Shedeur Sanders, and they have done a great job of doing that. Shedeur Sanders entered college football as a 3-star prospect, and he's going to be a top 10 draft pick by the end of this whole process. Dion's camp have done a great job of marketing this young man and also developing him as a football player. I think he has really maximized his talents. My criticisms still stand. I don't think the Browns should draft him at number 2 overall. If you want to know more about why I think that, I dropped a whole breakdown of that, 2 breakdowns of that actually, of why I don't really love the ideal of Shedeur at 2. So you go check that out. But that's my thoughts. I wanted to release it real quick. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.